All right, so we've talked quite a bit about filters in the context of our data model and how filters can transmit through table relationships. But now we're going to talk about filter context and how it impacts DAX measures. So remember the definition of a measure. It's evaluated based on filter context, which means that those measures recalculate whenever the fields or filters around them change. Consider this matrix view on the left side of the screen. If we pinpoint one cell of that matrix, we can understand exactly what filter context is being passed to that cell and therefore understand exactly how that measure is being calculated. So for this example highlighted cell, we're calculating a measure called orders, and it's evaluating based on the following filter context. The product name column from the product table is equal to mountain tire tube, because that's the filter context that's passed to this cell from the matrix row label, right? And then it's calculating our total orders based on that product context. So this is pretty intuitive on the surface. This allows the measure, this total orders measure, to return our order quantity for each product specifically, or whatever the matrix row and column label dictates. So this could be years, it could be countries, product categories, customer name, any other column or dimension that you could add in here. So again, pretty straightforward, but what might not be quite as straightforward is the fact that total or grand total values are not simply calculated by summing or averaging or whatever the aggregation method is, the values above, right? They're calculated as their own unique measures. So in this case, since we aren't calculating orders for a specific product in the total row, we're essentially taking that filter context of the product name and just ignoring it. Right? At a total row, there is no specific or individual product filter context. So it's a bit of a nuanced concept, but it's a very important thing to understand. And it's that each measure within a report behaves like it's being calculated on its own island, and it calculates according to its own unique filter context, even totals and grand total rows and values. So as a pro tip here, if you're struggling to understand the filter context or trying to understand the filter context impacting a visual, you can click on the header icon to see a list of filters and slicers, which are all part of that filter context that's impacting the visual. So here in this example, we can see a customer metric selection, income level, and year are all affecting our donut chart visual. As I was learning about filter context for the first time, one of the most helpful things for me was working through a number of different examples. So let's take a minute and we'll do that now. So here I've got a sample view of a dashboard. This is actually a piece of a dashboard that we're going to be building in the data viz section of this course. And obviously there's a ton of different information here. Right, we've got cards and donut charts and line charts with trends, and we've got matrix visuals and some slicers, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on here. And one thing to pay specific attention to is this page level filter in the filter pane that says year is 2021 or 2022. Now, we're going to talk about what these filters mean and how they work, but for now, all you really need to know is that this filter applies to every visual, every number, everything that you see on this entire page. This is a page level filter. It impacts everything on the page. So from here, we can actually pinpoint individual measure values to understand what filter context is being passed to them. This first case in the top left here, we're evaluating a measure named revenue per customer. And the filter context is that year equals 2021 or 2022. Again, that's coming from our page level filter. So with that filter context in mind, the DAX calculation for revenue per customer evaluates and spits out the result that we can see here. In this case, we see that average revenue per customer is $1,074. Let's look at another example here. So now we're not looking at an actual numerical value, right? We're looking at a tooltip that's been generated as part of a numerical value that's trended in a line chart, right? So this line chart is currently showing the total customers measure trended by day, but the tooltip is highlighting a specific day, so we're adding additional filter context of September 26th, 2021, just to generate the total customer value within that tooltip. So you might be thinking at this point, hey, what happened to that year filter context? Well, it's still there, But in this case, the more granular filter context of day wins out to show total customers only for September 26th. All right, so moving down to our donut chart, we're evaluating total orders here. And again, we've got that same 2021-2022 year filter context. The chart here is breaking down total orders by occupation. So in this particular highlighted cell or segment of the donut chart, the second piece of the filter context is that the occupation field in the customer table equals skilled manual. Moving over to the matrix visual, here's an interesting one too, because in this case, we're looking at a total row for a measure called revenue. So even though this value lives in a matrix that's broken down by customer names, because this measure, this little island cell, needs to calculate the total, we're basically calculating orders in the absence of a specific customer filter. Our filter context for this total is calendar year again, is 2021 or 2022. But here, what we're actually doing is we're saying, I want you to return the total, but filter based on the top 100 customers when we sort by total orders. So this total value is showing the total revenue for our top 100 customers. It's important to understand that even though that total line doesn't have a customer-specific filter, it is returning based on the filter of the top 100 customers. Up next here, we've got another example of a card visual, and this time we're showing total revenue. But what's neat here is that we've added the top customer by revenue filter context to return the revenue specific to that customer, right? So for here, it's actually grabbing filter context where the customer full name equals Mr. Maurice Sean, right? Because that's in our top customers by revenue above. And here where we see Mr. Maurice Sean, this is another card visual, but we're actually using the customer full name calculated column and then applying filters to produce a single name based on additional filter context. So we've got that same year page level filter, but we're adding onto that a filter for our top one customer based on the total revenue. And what's cool is you can actually verify this from the matrix visual that Mr. Maurice Sean is our top revenue driving customer. So hopefully these examples are helpful. I imagine that you're thinking to yourself, it's all pretty straightforward, pretty intuitive. But the thing is, it does get a bit more complicated and a bit more interesting. And to be honest, these views on this page aren't static views. This is an interactive dynamic dashboard with a bunch of different visuals. And what I mean by that is a user could drill into different occupations within this donut chart. Right, so if they were to drill into skilled manual, that filter context is going to be added to all of the other visuals that we've talked about. It's going to be added to all the visuals that we didn't talk about that are on this page, right? So every single measure, everything on this page is going to have an updated filter context based on that selection of skilled manual. And now let's say you wanted to look at a specific income level based on the occupation type. So then if you were to drill into average income as well, that's another piece of filter context that is going to be added to each one of these visuals around the page. So as you can probably tell, it can get quite a bit more sophisticated and much more complicated. And that's why it's really important for us to really nail down these fundamentals and understand exactly what's going on. So we're going to talk through a number of examples as we continue writing DAX functions. And then this will really come into play in a number of different ways later on in the course when we actually start building visuals and reports. So stay tuned. We've got some great stuff ahead.